you very much, Brandon, for being here with us today. The community of practice has been running these events so that all the CAEs can get to know their competitions a little bit better. My colleague Dan Manson suggested that you would be a great guest for this as an exemplar of things that are going well in the competition space. So if you don't mind, please just take it away and we'll have a number of follow-up questions for you after you're done.
Sure. I'm going to try to share my screen here. And can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be looking this way because this is the direction my camera's at. I'm going to be glancing over that way where the screens are. So it just kind of worked out that way. So I titled this, when Dan asked me to present for you today, I kind of needed to know a little bit about the audience. And he said, oh, well, it's the CAE community, and that's pretty widespread. So let me just start out by asking the folks who are here, and just raise your hand. Go to reactions and raise your hand. How many of you are at a school that has a CDC team? Raise your hand. Okay, Frank, Tom, Dustin. Okay.
Tom has a team everywhere anyway.
Andrew. Okay, great. Perfect. So I will tell you right now, I don't recognize any of you being in the Western region, so that's okay. The Western region is, I like to call it the wild, wild west, because we do some innovative things. We follow all the national rules. We do, everything that Dwayne and San Antonio at UTSA, they outline. I've worked with them for years. Big fan of him, Kevin, and their support staff. I started out in CCDC as a coach. Lent some help to Dan when he was the director. I'll get into that here in a minute. But I kind of entitled this, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About WRCCDC. If I can get my slide here going, but we're afraid to ask. And I get this a lot from coaches, not just in my region, but across other regions, across the rest of the United States. And it is an education process that the directors of all the regions and the national organizations as well has to do. And we fall down on this sometimes. COVID has been a big problem for us. Because a lot of regions run things in person and not online. I think the Midwest region does a really good job of running things online. So the first thing that you need to know about this is it's not a CTF. All right. So if you go in, you start looking, oh, I really want to put together a CCDC team. I want to find out about it. If your clubs or your students are participating in CTFs, that's great. I think that's wonderful. There are a lot of other competitions that are out there like that. This is not it. Okay, this is not a CTF by any stretch of the imagination. And this slide did not come out very well. I'm just going to skip over it here. There we go. We can't do it without a lot of sponsorships. Some regions run on a shoestring budget. That's okay. And I've been told this by nationals, we are the region that gets the most money of all the other regions, because I actively go out and I hunt down sponsors and I evangelize this competition, because I have seen how much good it has done, not just for students that are competing, but for industry as a whole. And I'll share stories later on after I'm done with my presentation. But a little bit of history about WRCCDC. The first director ever was Dan. The first ops team lead was a gentleman by the name of James Schneider, and he did a lot of really great stuff, especially our region was very innovative in the early days. James wrote the very first inject scoring engine, not service scoring engine, but how the system that you could actually turn your business problems into, and it could be scored by judges, and it was very robust, written in Python. Our first judge was a gentleman by the name of Gary Pierce. Our first red team was a conglomeration of folks from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's and the LA DA's office. And our first winning team was actually a community college, Mount San Antonio College, which is right next door to Cal Poly Pomona. And we had a lot of lessons learned, a lot of lessons learned. Fast forward 16 years. And today, it's now hosted at Coastline College in beautiful Garden Grove, California. Yes, I say that sarcastically, but the hotel that we stay at is literally 3 blocks away from Disneyland. So that's a good selling point for anybody to try to get into the competition and make it to the regional. It also goes a long way in getting sponsors. Laughter is appreciated. Thank you. All right. After all, we are all about learning. And we also try to have a lot of fun too. Every year we go through an entire process of recruiting staff. We recruit staff out of students who have played previously. It's an organic growth organization. We also, a lot of our staff present at a lot of conferences, hacker conferences, defense conferences, Black Hat, DEF CON, Scale, ShellCon, which is a local one in Southern California, Cactus Con, which is in Arizona. And we really evangelize this. Okay, so I have a lot of people who are especially interested in joining CCDC or putting together a CCDC team ask me, how hard is it? And that's a loaded question. So instead of saying how hard it is, I put together this slide to kind of rank these different competitions. And I would actually rank CCDC at the top, followed by CPTC, the NCAE Cyber Games. I don't know a lot about those, but from what I have read and from what I've talked to students, it's mostly CTF in the beginning, but their actual regional and final event is more CCDC-esque. Hivestorm, and then NCL, Panoply, and US Cyber Games. I've had students that have played in NCL, played in Panoply, played in Hivestorm. A lot of those are still more CTF-esque. Except when you get to the finals, then it's completely different. There are also a lot of regional cyber games I'm sure that you have in different areas of the country. One that we play in all the time is hosted by National University. Chris Simpson does a really good job. He hosts the SoCal Cyber Cup. That is, again, CTF in the very beginning. It's hosted by the same folks that do NCL. Cyber Skyline, and it's more of a traditional CCDC type of competition for their final. So what is it all about? CCDC is about managing a real world environment. Okay, you are literally given the night before the competition a packet of information, and in that information is a topology diagram, a welcome letter, some information on logging in to do remote access if it's a remote competition, or credentials. The in-person competition, the regionals and the national finals, you get that literally 5 minutes before you walk in the door. And so you don't have a whole lot of time to prepare yourself for it. It's improving upon IT and establishing a DFIR process, digital forensics incident response process. And this has evolved over time. There are good ways to do CCDC and not so good ways to do CCDC. And the regional directors, we go and we have usually a conference call once or twice a year, and we bounce ideas off of one another and everything. But the main thing about this is it's evolved as this industry has evolved over time to give the students the best learning real world experience that they can get. So other ones, I'll skip over that. I kind of already talked about that. So a little bit about WRCCDC. We have a qualifier. I'll get to the schedule of our events here towards the end of the presentation. The 8 top teams advance to the regional final. I wish I could have 10 top teams. I don't have the equipment to do 10 top teams today. Maybe later on I could do 10 teams. I couldn't do more because the facility I have can't support more than 10 teams. So each region is going to be different in their makeup of how they do a qualifier. Some regions used to have to go and try to recruit teams to play. I still do that. Not as much anymore as I used to. And it's more along the lines of getting colleges and universities to understand the complexity of CCDC and what to expect, so they don't have a bad first experience. The winner advances to the nationals, and the second place team of all the regionals, there are 9 regionals right now, go and play in like one last ditch winner take all wild card competition. Basically it's like Hive Storm. And the winner of that gets to go to the national competition as well. We follow the national CCDC rules mostly. Where do we deviate? And the national competition lets us deviate in some certain regards. Wireless is a great example of that. National will never do a wireless network. I've talked to Dwayne and Kevin at nationals, and they're nope. I love it. I run wireless in our facility at Garden Grove. It's a huge part of IT defense and network defense, in my opinion. We also run phone systems. So we have IP phones. We used to run Cisco Call Manager years ago. Now we use like an asterisk type of system or derivative. I have a very robust operations team. I think I have 22 members on my operations team right now, and about 6 or 7 of them are solely they just do apps. So they write apps and they make these apps as insecure as they possibly can. And one gentleman that I have on my team does that in phone systems, in like an asterisk phone system. He's great. Cloud. We've moved to running a lot of our network, especially for qualifiers and finals, in AWS. So a typical topology for a qualifier you'll have a certain number of VMs that run inherently in our system and a number of VMs that run in AWS. They're linked together by a virtual private cloud VPN connection, and you have to manage it all. We make this a target-rich environment for our red team, as well as to make it more difficult for the blue teams. We have some blue teams that are really good, especially the ones that make it to the national finals. So to kind of stay within the realm of the competition, and I've talked to Dave Cowan, who's the national red team lead, about this. He takes a lot of pride in his red team. They don't they don't give the red team any type of advantage. The red team starts at the same time the blue team starts, and they get about as much information beforehand or less. And he still prides himself on being able to break into all 10 teams within 15 minutes. I don't have the caliber of his red team. I am working on trying to get that. I still do not let my red team have an advantage of going in first. This is slightly different, in my opinion, from real life, because a lot of times when you're engaging in a DFIR engagement, you're coming in after all the bad stuff has happened, right? And you're doing cleanup. That may change in future years, especially as these blue teams get better. That's discussions that we've had, amongst regional directors. But I try to give enough targets, enough VMs, enough infrastructure that 8 blue team members cannot go in and lock everything down within an hour. It's just impossible. It's just impossible. And that gives the red team a even playing field to find something and get a foothold and for the competition to play out. So with that, from the classroom to the competition, I wrote a paper about this a few years ago, and the competition to the classroom, this is a great tool for students to learn. Why is that? I've talked to several competitors over the years, and many times competitors will come up to me and say, I learned more in the last 3 days of this competition than I've learned in the last 3 years of being in university. This is something that gives us as teachers, as instructors, to base ourselves off of, to give us material to teach in the classroom. We can teach the theory, we can teach the policy all day long. We're all really good at that. But to get our hands dirty and have our students get their hands dirty in the actual operation of networks and systems and applications, that's what employers are looking for, quite frankly. So how do we score this thing? Typically, we have different points. We have service points. So what is a service point? Well, in our environment, we might have web servers and mail servers and document servers and databases and things like that. Well, all those operate off of an open port, right? So you have a web page that you might check. You might have a SSH connection that you have to log into. That can all be automated with a service scoring engine. The service scoring engine that we use is the one that is written by the national organization, National CCDC, and you can program it to check these websites, SSH connections, FTP connections, etc., every however many minutes you want, every 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute, an hour. It's very flexible. You get a certain amount of points if you have a successful check. If you do not have a successful check, you don't get that point. There's also what we call business injects. These are the manual problems that the students have to work on. It's kind of like a CTF, but on steroids. So some examples of business injects might be, hey, rewrite our password policy. Add these 10 users into Active Directory. Do a wireless audit of our wireless system. Do a threat assessment of our network. Do a vulnerability scan of this. And then they have to turn in the reports for that. Those range in point totals, depending on how easy or hard it is, from typically 25 points to 200 points. Deductions. You lose points. So if the red team breaks into your system and they report it correctly, you lose points based off of a system that we have. So for example, if they gain root access to a Linux box, that's a 100-point deduction. If they gained user level access to a Windows box, that might be 25 points. They can stack. So you can lose a lot of points really quickly. The other way that you lose points is by service level agreement violations. Your service level agreement is told to you up front. So if you have service checks and they're every 3 minutes, and after 5 failed service checks, 15 minutes, you not only don't get those points over that 15 minutes, but you get knocked back an additional 100 points. That ranges differently from competition to competition. We set that at a very low bar in our invitationals as teams are just coming into play. And it's, at a high bar during our regional final. You can get points back if you do an incident response. response report. So if you detect the red team activity and you find out what they did and you correctly report it, you can get up to 50% of the deduction back. So if you detect that, oh yeah, they got root access on this Linux server, here's where we found it, here's the message log where they logged in, here's where they dumped our SSH HMAX. Okay, great, wonderful. You show all that, you definitely getting 50 points back in my book. I'll get the questions at the end if you don't mind, so please hold off here. I'm about halfway done. Many learning experience for students and coaches alike. It never ceases to amaze me how students take away from this competition and really improve upon themselves and really learn about this industry. Not just their technical skills, but in this case, this is during COVID, we made them do presentations via Zoom. And we had students who had their heads cut off on their camera. We had students who had blurry, they didn't check their the pixelization of their camera, all kinds of things that really, you think, oh God, why didn't you see that? But you don't see it until you see it. Oops. So how to win points, how to play the game. And I get all the time. How do I play this game? Well, keep your services up. And we run a baseline team that nobody's playing on, just their services, and we see how many points that the total would be. So you could not touch any of your services and do anything and make a lot of points, but you're probably going to lose a lot of points from red team deductions. Sounds pretty easy, right? Complete the business problems. I have teams that really focus in on just doing the business problems, and they don't really focus in on the red team. And that's a strategy too. The injects, oh yeah, some of them are very easy, some of them are very technical. In the last 5 years, I would have to say that our region really has done a pivot to the technical side of the house, because you have to have those technical skills. How you lose points, red team activity, like I talked about, knowing what you think you know, but you don't, or what we typically call ops teaming yourself. So self-inflicted wounds when you do something to your system and you knock your services offline and then you can't figure out how to get them back up. We see that a lot. Answering questions incorrectly for the business and injects. Read the inject. We emphasize that all the time to students. Read the inject. What are we asking for? Because if you give me things outside of what you're answering on the inject, you're not going to get credit for it. And it could be a beautifully written report. You're not going to get credit for it. And not following your incident response reports. This drives me mad as a regional director. So much so last year, the very first inject that I had my white team, my judging team write at our very first competition was for the students to write an incident report template. And in our invitational, we had like 23 teams that played. 7 of them, all of them wrote something or got something off the internet and turned in. Only 7 of them used it. So I found that very interesting as well. So how do I train? And this I get all the time from coaches. How do I train for this? That's a great question. I love it. Start building systems, building networks, build a lab, leverage VMware or Hyper-V or whatever your virtualization flavor of the month is, and administrate them. Red team yourself, right? A lot of colleges now have competitions inherently in their programs. I think that's wonderful. Start looking at building that out. Do some common business problems, right? You can do this in the classroom. You can do it in the club. You can have them work on policies and procedures. a backup policy, disaster recovery policy, password policy. What does that look like on paper? How do you enforce it in practice? That cyber range is, again, very important. And remember, CCDC is all hands on. It's not look up this thing and Google this and then answer this question in a CTF, boom, done. It is very, very, very practical. Practice your red team mojo. You have to be just as good offensively as defensively. Now in the competition, you can't, hack your fellow blue teams or fight back against the red team. It's all defensive, and that's in the rules. But you need to understand what the red team is doing in order to fight them off. So what some of the red team's tactics are: they scan, they look for default creds, they exploit, and they persist. There's lots and lots and lots of hosts for them to do that against. It's a target-rich environment in WRC-CDC. They look for PII, and we plant PII in the environment. Databases, it depends on the scenario. So last year's scenario was Bozo's Clown College. So we had a lot of student information, databases, learning management system that we ran. We had a little health center that had student personal health information database in it. So that's the stuff that the red team really looks for, because if they can exploit that, it could be up to 500-point deduction per team. They deface websites, they nuke services, they persist. That is their entire, they act just like a normal adversary would act. There's an old military saying, practice your plan, but all plans go out the window at first contact with the enemy, which is typically the case in CCDC as well. But you still need to try to plan out as much as you can, as best as you can, and understand what you do in different types of situations. What happens if we lose a website? What are the steps that we look at to restore that website? What happens if we lose and we can no longer send mail? What are the steps that we do to try to restore mail? Things like that. Those are all types of run books that I've seen successful teams develop. So I'll be happy to, I shared this with Dan, so hopefully he can share this with everybody. It has all my links in it. Some resources for practicing. I'm a big fan of Try Hack Me. It's not just offensive, but they have a lot of defensive rooms in there as well. We have an archive, so you can download any of our environments for the last 10 years of the competitions that we've ran at archive.wrccdc.org. It's also a great, you can also download the PCAP files from the competition. So if you guys are doing like some really hardcore research on attacks, and we have our PCAP files are downloaded all the time by researchers. VMware, get used to virtualization. You can get a 30-day trial of ESX at vmware.com. AWS, you can get up to a year of free tier service with a free account. CyberWatch West had a white paper done about 10 years ago, but a lot of it is still relevant. It kind of goes over the rules in a little bit more detail. And I left the link for that there. And last but not least, and I'm going to have a lot of time for questions here, and trust me, I can talk about this all day long. Here's our schedule. So if you're not in the Western region, that's okay. You want to try this out and see what it's like, sign up for our invitational. It's free. You can sub players in and out. The coach can sit in the room and coach. We kind of loosely follow national CCDC rules for the invitationals. They do not count against your time frame for nationals. Only the qualifier does. So the regional qualifier is on the 18th. I still have some space in my invitationals. If you are on the West Coast, you should be playing this. Sign up again. It's free. This year, I will probably start going back and charging for the region qualifier next year. The March 31st through April 2nd is our regional final at Garden Grove at Coastline College. If you go to our main page, you can there's a link there for that invitational sign up. If you do sign up, please make sure that you have a team of at least 4 people to play. That if you can get that. If you're thinking about signing up now and getting the students later, I would hold off, get the students first, then sign up. And with that, I will take questions. I'll stop my share here. And wow, we were at 7 people when I joined, and there's 22. Great.
Thanks, Brandon. That was an outstanding presentation. And
Thank you.
in my experience, all of the best competitions have some source of institutional knowledge and passion. And it sounds like you and your close team are keeping it going every year and every time you go through this. So
it's a labor of love. I was involved with WRCC-DC from the very beginning as the coach of the Cal Poly team. I left it for a while. While I was working on my PhD, and I literally, funny story, true story. Ron Pike used to run it at Cal Poly 5 years ago. He and I share a classroom there. His class was before mine. I came in and he looked like, somebody had just, shot his dog. And I'm like, Ron, what's wrong? And he was having problems getting support for the competition. And he said, I'm gonna have to give it back to nationals. It might be virtual this year. And I basically said, hold my beer over my dead body. I called my dean at Coastline. I told her that I had an opportunity to bring this on. Some of you may know her, Nancy Jones. And she was like, sounds great, do it. I'm like, well, we need to talk to so-and-so and so-and-so. She's like, that's okay, I'll take care of it. I'm in my first semester as a tenure track professor, and they let me do this. So talk about loyalty. I love Coastline. They have been such a wonderful support for this activity. I owe them a whole lot. And so for the past 5 years, I've really put my heart and soul into being the director of this competition and making it successful as I can. And it also, like I said, we recruit staff. That's a major drive every year. And as the director, the one thing I've noticed is I'm rebuilding a team every year. So last year I was rebuilding my white team. This year I'm rebuilding my red team. Next year, oh my God, I'm probably going to be rebuilding my ops team, which may put me in the grave. I don't know. So it's a constant cycle. It's a constant cycle of improvement, and good competitions go through that. Okay.
Yeah.
So Frank, what's your question, sir?
Thanks. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm from Triton Technical College in South Carolina, and our colleges have 2 CCDC opportunities, basically. They can participate in the Southeast regional competition. But then we also have what's called PCDC, which is our local state-only competition.
Okay.
That's essentially the same idea, not the same scenario as the Southeastern region. But one of the things we do is we have a day where high school teams compete as well.
Mhm.
Is that something that other CCDT, do y'all do that, or?
We'd love to do that. We kind of leave Cyber Patriot to Cyber Patriot. I'm restricted on the number of teams that can compete in our competition. And I also drive, because we have a similar competition, SoCal Cyber Cup. Again, Chris Simpson runs that out of National University, and that's for high school and middle schools and community colleges. So they don't have universities that take place in that. And being at a community college, trust me, I I feel your pain. And you have a third option. You can come and take part in our invitationals if you want to as well. It's open to anybody, to any school across the country. And with that, the level of competition I feel is a little bit higher than Cyber Patriot. We've had some high schools that have played similar type of competitions and done well. But, you know, we have some of the Cyber Patriot national champions in our backyard. We have Troy, we have Beverly Hills, and the like. So,
Well, I mean, the way they run it, the PCDC competition is they qualify through Cyber Patriot to participate, and they have a day. They just compete against each other. So we have a day of high school, a day of colleges, 2-year and 4-year, and then we have a pro day on the
Mhm.
last day where a lot of the college team members can be on a pro team during the competition, and it's a great opportunity. I was just curious. I mean, Cyber Patriot I've kind of seen everywhere, but the high school competition in the CCD with the CCDC type competition, we have some good high schools.
Yeah.
So and it's a good recruiting tool for colleges too. So I was just curious. Thanks.
yep. So that's it. That's great. Stephen.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm trying to do as a new professor myself is like, okay, I'm bringing in a lot of programming experience into the class, but I have no real good idea of like, okay, when people say cyber range, what is that? Okay, I want to start up some classes that maybe do red team or blue team styled things. And so it's just like, okay, what's the good first step, kind of a thing.
Great question. So I just went through this process with a community college in my area because they were trying to do the same thing. You have to work with your IT staff at your institution. And if you have a good working relationship with your campus's network engineer, that's wonderful. You can probably get things to work. If not, find out who he or she is and build that relationship. Building a cyber range is basically you getting a separate or a fork off of your internet connection, putting in a VPN appliance or firewall appliance like a Palo Alto, a Sonic Wall, a Cisco ASA, or you can even build your own Linux box to do this. And then behind that, you can build out like VMware hosts, and you can, if your school is a VMware Academy, you can get licensing relatively inexpensively. If you don't want to go with VMware, you can go with Hyper-V. If you're a Microsoft Academy, if you can go with Oracle, you can go with a lot of different open source solutions as well for virtualization, and then build VMs on those and try to build out your own environment. Now, what does an environment consist of? Well, what would you have in a business, right? You would have file servers. You would have some sort of LDAP system, right? Like Active Directory. You'd have a database, I'm sure. You might have a website, whether it's internal or external. You may or may not have mail, but you could build a mail system and have the students administrate. And then within that, do a little bit of networking and set up some Kali Linux boxes and have students try to break into those systems with Kali Linux and different types of offensive tool sets. That takes some time to build up, right? It's not going to do it overnight. And I've been working with this community college here in Southern California for about 4 weeks now, and teaching them how to do this and how to get it online for their CCDC team. And this is their first year that they're competing. So I also try to set expectations for schools. You should not be afraid to play this game. Okay. And you should set the expectations of your students in that way as well. Look, there are schools that have been playing this for 16 years or 18 years. They have an established program. We're new to it. It would be kind of like if you had a Division III football school go up against Alabama. right? In their second year, first year of having the football team at their institution, right? But can they get up and eventually be an SEC team one day? Yeah, they probably could. And honestly, this is a faster process than that. I had one colleague at a university that I will not state, USC, several years ago, that said they didn't want to play until they thought they could win. And that's the wrong attitude to have in this. Now, USC has a great team. They have some really, really wonderfully motivated students on their team, and I love working with them. And I like the staff that they have there. I love working with them as well. So, but I've seen all kinds of excuses, if you will, as to why not to play CCDC. And the reasons to play CCDC, in my opinion, outweigh them every time. The students get an incredible amount of practical experience.
Yeah, we brought 5 of them to the Hack the Port 22 here down in
Mhm.
Gulfport. And with one of them who had quite a bit of experience, and 4, I should say, out of the 6 of us, including myself, he was the only one with a lot of good experience. And we're very blessed. Like I said, they learned a lot from that experience, and we're fortunate enough to win 3rd place in it. But it wasn't, I just, was telling them, let's, just go there, do what we can. And oh, by the way, the first one back to the hotel is not the winner, meaning you got kicked out. So don't get kicked out, don't get arrested. I'm not bailing you out. I'd rather not take up the entire time. Is there a way to get in touch with you so I could send further questions?
Yeah, just a second. I'll put my email in the chat. And I would be happy to respond to anybody. I think this year I said it was free for the invitational. I think it cost like $100. I take that back. And here's my email if you're interested in playing. I mean, that's only for outside teams. If you're a Western regional team, it's free.
We're down in Mississippi, so
send me an email there and I can get you more information about it. And Dan and I can probably go on about stories about students who've played in this competition. I'm wanting to do some research on this, so I have asked my regional director counterparts if they wouldn't mind doing some surveys for me and give me contact lists. I want to find out what students are making right out of college, if they are on a team versus if they're not on a team. What are they making in 3 years, 5 years, etc. I think you will find, and again, this is my opinion, I don't have data to back it up, but I think you will find that students that have played in these different competitions are outpacing their contemporaries salary-wise. And I would even go digger into that and say that folks who are playing CPTC, CCDC are outpacing those who are playing NCL, etc. I don't have data to back that up. That's just my feeling, but I'd like to research that. So that's something.
And then question about that from the research perspective.
Sure.
I think you got to be careful not to be biased in terms of the measure, because the students who are highly motivated tend to be the ones who are going to compete, who tends to be the ones that are successful at work, who tends to be the ones that get paid higher. So
good argument. Good argument.
Yeah, it may be that I'm just throwing a research point here. You may want to assess maybe motivational level, not based on self-reported, based on other means of assessing motivation. I know we have Zoe on the line as well. Zoe, those of you who don't know, is being engaged in leading our competency evidencing competency working group, and she's joining our activity. Hi, Zoe. And I'm sure she would like to follow up on this issue because that's her life's passion, I guess, recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right when you're saying about the potential skewing within any kind of sample, that students who are doing well in the competition are students who tend to be doing well. The thing which really interests me is the way that we're mobilizing the classroom learning within a real life situation. And Brandon, I so enjoyed the presentation. So thank you for that. And I think thinking about the way that different kinds of learning better prepare students for the workplace. I think there's a lot of qualitative work which needs to be done there, as well as looking for any kind of quantitative correlations.
That's a good point.
It's so exciting.
It is. And if there were another 1 or 2 hours in the day, I probably would have had this a little bit more fleshed out. But it's one of those things that I always look at doing when the holidays come around, that I can get this started, and something else always comes up, it seems.
Yeah, but that's a very valid point in terms of assessing the impact of competitions on our student skills. I think that's massive.
Any other questions, comments?
Brandon, Jake here again. I am part of the NCAE Cyber Games team, and we have been referred to as CCDC Light. We prefer CCDC Nice. So we take a
nice. Okay.
Yeah, we take a lighter approach and more of a directed learning approach to infrastructure. And one of our goals is to prepare students to be good competitors in CCDC. So nice to connect with you, and we'll connect with you.
I have a question for you then, actually, because I feel that there needs to be coordination between competitions, because we have and this is another research angle as well. Over the last 16, 18 years, so many competitions have just sprouted up out of the ground. We have a hard time putting our schedule together so that we don't impact other competitions. And this is something that happened with NCAE last year. And honestly, it cost us 4 teams not competing in our regional, right? So I usually put out my schedule in early August and put it on our website so that others, can see that and, give me the courtesy of not competing with their competition. Would you please do that? I don't know if you set your schedule this year or not. But I usually, like I said, you can look on wrccdc.org and see what my schedule is. But it would be very appreciative. And the question that I have is, you promote your competition as a competition with no experience or things of that nature, which I love, by the way. But at what point do you not allow students to return? Because I would assume after 1 year or 2 years, okay, you've competed, now you can no longer compete. You need to move on to CCDC. Is that your premise?
That's a really good question, Brandon, and I would love to coordinate with you more. Lynn Clark has informally appointed me or anointed me CyberCzar for the CAE community. And as there's a lot more responsibility than authority or fun parts of that job. And coordinating is something that I need to take the lead on. And so I'm looking forward to working with you on that. As far as the NCAE Cyber Games, our premise was that the same students would not be competing in our event that would then be competing in CCDC in the same year. And what we've found is that may not necessarily be the case. And also there's overlap in advisor or coaches that can cause us to actually have a conflict. So we're working on that. Love to work with you on that more, and I will be in touch personally. Your second question, yes. Our first thought was that they would be one and done in the NCAE Cyber Games. We're finding that most of the students came to us with so little the first year that right now we're seeing twice. They can work with us twice. And the students that are ready, I think they know it. And our mechanism for screening students that are kind of too advanced for us, we're working on that as well. Love to coordinate with you on that going forward.
Sure. That's just something that I saw how you advertise your competition is very novel. I was like, wow, that's a great marketing tool. And I'm sure you got probably thousands of students last year that played. It's just one of those things I was curious about. Right. So, and how you track, and do you track students as to how many times they've played and things like that?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the interest, and you and I can connect personally. Also, I think the NCAA Cyber Games will be on this series sometime in the near future, and I'll go into a little bit more depth on our approach, and you can ask me a number of questions then as well. But this event is really about you, and I think you gave a wonderful presentation that was very well received. It's also been recorded, and I think it'll probably get some really good views as a recording. I guess one final thing I'd like to end on a positive note. Thinking about your experiences with this event, is there one or two moments that you can share with us where you and your team really felt that warm and tingly feeling as an educator, that this thing that we just saw the students do really makes it worthwhile for us to do all this work? Is there a moment or a couple moments that you'd like to share that really kind of show how special your event is?
I kind of talked about one already, where I've had students come up to me and say they've learned more, in 3 days than they've had it in 3 years. I like connecting with students years down the road to see where they are. I actually had one recently, and it actually wasn't she is on the CCDC team at this community college I've been working with. And she's a freshman. I think she's like all of 19 years old. She just put on her resume that she was part of the CCDC team, and that, this is what she was studying, and she got hired at a managed service provider like almost right away, just because and they told her that because you're working in a competition, you're going to be learning a lot faster than your contemporaries are. And we want to mold you as a long-term employee at our company. So I get those types of stories. I have stories of where I had an entire CCDC team as a coach that got hired by Boeing. This was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I have seen at nationals where literally a shoving match almost broke out between two sponsors to talk to one student. I saw the team captain of the University of Virginia about 5 years ago, that got hired by Raytheon on the spot for a 6-figure salary. Yeah, I've seen all kinds of really cool things that have happened in this activity. It's kind of like NCAA basketball, where you see students get drafted, and the students that are at the national level, who make it to nationals, they're your first round draft picks. The students that make it to the regional, they're your second and third round draft picks. And even the students that don't make the regional, they still are very successful because they put themselves out there and they're learning. Sometimes, in spite of their programs. I've had one regional about 4 or 5 years ago where I literally had to drive to a R1 university to find anybody, a janitor, an IT person, to come and be the coach for the day for that team, because they showed up at the regional final without a coach, and that's against the rules. And I got somebody there, fortunately, and they ended up coming in 3rd place that year. So, like I said, in spite of the challenges that they may even have at their own university, I see students succeed.
Well, thanks again. I think you can see the interest in your work. Dan and Zoe are are leading the competency effort with regard to competitions, and we'll probably be reaching out to you at some point to prototype something here or there. But thanks again on behalf of Dan and myself, and I'll turn it back to Yair and Ann for wrap up.
Excellent. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Just to remind everyone, we have additional events coming up every month for this initiative. So please, I share that in the chat area. We're going to be updating this, and shortly you're going to get a survey to assess the session as well. The recording of the session will be posted on the CAE community YouTube channel in a few days, and it will be documented at the same page at the lower part of the page. If you're interested, there are additional activities, like we have the other event that most of you probably attending already. Get to know your fellow CAEs. You need to register on all of our events with your .edu email. We are just trying to avoid any individuals trying to sneak in, so be aware. Okay, that's about it. Thank you so much, and stay safe, everyone.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Outstanding.